Chapter 16. Home Stretch. While it would have taken an hour or more to Herath Prime at sublight speed, it is only a 20-talk trip at FTL. While this is underway, the entire crew, with nothing else to do, makes their way to the medbay to check on Benny. It is the first time since the battle started that Wil has been able to survey the damage to the Ghost. His spirits begin to fall the moment he leaves the bridge, which was a wreck, but next to the rest of the ship, looks brand new. The main corridor connecting the forward section to the bulk of the ship is ravaged, a hastily installed patch covering a meter-wide rip in the side. The faint wheeze of escaping oxygen can still be heard around the edges. Conduits and piping are shredded, some patched and repaired, most not. The main crew space, lounge, and kitchenette, while intact, is a mess. A nearby section must have decompressed, because anything not bolted down has been blown around the space. The emergency bulkhead leading to the living quarters is closed, meaning that one or more of the crew berths has been exposed to space. Turning down the short corridor leading to the medbay, Wil sees more ruptured pipe and torn wiring. The medbay, surprisingly, is in pretty good shape. The small space has only 2 beds, with the autodock wedged between them. Equipment overhead can seal off one or both beds into surgical suites, if necessary. Benny is laying on one of the beds, the autodock in standby mode beside him. "He doesn't look too bad," Wil comments. "Almost peaceful," Maxim says. Zephyr checks the wall display set above the head of the bed, assessing Benny's vitals. "Looks like he'll live. The autodock set the broken bones and relieved the swelling in his brain. I guess that head wound was worse than I thought," she adds, almost a whisper. "Thank you, Maxim, for getting him down here." Maxim looks from Benny to Zephyr. "Of course, he's crew." He places his big hand on the small Braylex leg. Wil and Zephyr both nod. Wil walks around the bed and faces the 2 ex-peacekeepers and the engineering bot. "Max is right. Benny is, we all are, crew. Family. I haven't had that in a long time. I didn't leave my world and home system by choice. I was kidnapped and thrust into this life." At the questioning looks on the Pelorians' faces, and the head tilt of the bot, he raises a hand to hold off questions. "A story for another time, maybe. Suffice to say, in the last few cycles, I've been dealing with homesickness, loneliness, and I'd guess some depression as well. But these last few weeks, I've felt more alive than ever. I didn't set out to have a crew this big. Max and Zephyr were supposed to be it. I had it all set out in my head. As they say, though, plans never survive first contact. And mine certainly didn't." He looks down at Benny. "I've known Benny longer than the rest of you. I'd never considered that he'd leave Fury, so he was never someone I'd considered to ask to join me. Circumstances clearly had other plans. Whatever happens next, I want you 3, and Benny, when he wakes up, to know this. Your crew, your family, the Ghost is and always will be your home." Wil looks at Maxim and Zephyr, now standing side by side holding hands. "You both know that I didn't want to get involved. I didn't know about any of this when I rescued you from the Partherians. But thank you for helping me see the right path and do the right thing. Being out here on my own, doing some of the things I've had to do, seeing the things I've seen, I kinda lost track of that for a bit." "Is this when we all hug?" Gabe asks. Laughter breaks out from all 3 non-bot crew members, and they move to hug the tall bot. From the speaker in the ceiling, "Attention crew, 5 minutes until arrival on Herath Prime." "Okay, team. Showtime. This isn't over yet. That Peacekeeper carrier is most definitely behind us. Possibly all 3 of them. It's gonna be a fight. Gabe, I know there's not much you can do for our sublight systems, but I have a feeling we'll be landing on the planet. so I'll need you in engineering making sure our Atmo engines work.
Captain, in case you have forgotten, the port engine pod is gone, and with it, the port repulsor lift. Atmospheric flight, let alone landing, will be tremendously difficult, if not impossible.
Gabe warns. Shit. I forgot, actually. Well, it is what it is. I don't think we'll be safe until we're on the ground. That peacekeeper carrier on its own could likely destroy whatever space stations the Herath have. Zephyr turns.
Do you think Janus would go that far?
You know him better than I do, but yeah, I think he might, Wil sighs. This cat is out of the bag, but if he can destroy the evidence and the witnesses, it all becomes circumstantial. The GC isn't going to explain this away easily, but they have the resources to make this all look like a gigantic hoax. We have to keep that from happening. Herath Prime. The drop from FTL to sublight is rougher than normal, but considering that the Ghost is no longer operating under its own power, this is not surprising. The moment they return to normal space, Wil throws the throttle as far forward as it will go, knowing that only about 50% of his top speed is available. The ships that were towing the Ghost have detached and are now breaking off, circling back around toward the lone peacekeeper carrier that has dropped out of FTL directly behind them.
Incoming message from Commander Shritan,
Zephyr announces, putting the message through on the primary display. Commander,
Wil greets her. Captain, you need to get to the main spaceport at the capital. Herath Space Control will be calling shortly. The rest of us will cover you. We hope that this Commander Janus will give up once you're clearly out of his grasp. The Quillant cruiser with the GNO reporter will stay to the side to capture as much of the proceedings as possible. Good luck.
Without waiting for Wil to acknowledge, the screen goes blank, then returns to its default view of the planet below. Incoming missiles, Maxim announces. Fleet is maneuvering to intercept. Going evasive. Well, as evasive as we can, Wil amends.
Incoming hail from Herath Space Control,
Zephyr announces, then puts through the call on the primary display. A young Herath in a Herath Navy uniform shows on a screen.
Ghost, this is Herath Space Control. We've cleared the airspace over and around Shakri Spaceport. Do you require any other assistance?
Hey there, Herath Space Control. That's mighty nice of you, and we appreciate it. We will most definitely need help. Our port engine pod is damaged. Well, okay, it's actually mostly gone. That leaves us one repulsor lift shy of what we need for atmospheric flight. Our Atmo engines are functional, but this ship isn't designed to fly on lift alone, I'm afraid. Wil is fighting the controls and jerking the ship left and right as best he can, to avoid as much fire as possible. Thankfully, a Zangar frigate has taken up a position above and behind the Ghost, using its shields to protect the smaller craft mostly. The young officer nods.
Acknowledged, Ghost. We'll dispatch a landing assist drone. It will meet you once you clear the outer atmosphere. Unfortunately, they're not designed for re-entry, so you'll have to get there on your own. But after that, it'll link up with your ship's computer and attach itself to your port side.
The ship rattles, skimming the upper atmosphere. Acknowledged, and thanks, Wil says, focusing on his controls. The primary display resumes the default view, a rapidly growing planet directly ahead and below the ship. Okay, everyone, hang on to something. Gabe, we good on the Atmos? Overhead, the reply comes back, garbled and barely coherent.
Yes, Captain. The atmospheric engines are ready to go. I've also diverted all remaining shield power to the forward shields.
Good call. Wil has both hands on the flight controls. Maxim and Zephyr are hanging on to their stations tightly. On the primary display, the planet is becoming obscured by the superheated plasma forming along the deflector shields. The ship is rattling non-stop now and shaking violently. Behind the ship, the battle hasn't stopped raging. The Peacekeeper carrier is plummeting toward the upper atmosphere, being harried at every turn by the few remaining ships capable of fighting, including the Quillant ship assigned to hold back to ensure a recording of the battle survives. A damaged Zangar frigate plows directly into the carrier, exploding and causing explosions all along the side of the ship. The Peacekeeper craft is unloading every missile battery it has, swamping the shields and defense capabilities of the defenders. A Quillant ship explodes right next to a Herath rebel cruiser, which then also explodes.
This is Monel Farash with GNO for what might be my last report.
The lights around the newscaster flicker, and smoke is visible everywhere.
The Quillant battlecruiser we were on originally was going to stay on the sidelines to ensure a record of this incident is captured, but the Peacekeeper carrier has devastated the defenders to the point that this very cruiser is one of the few left to bravely defend the Ghost. As you can see, we've taken a lot of damage, and I've heard there are massive casualties across the ship. I'm told the few remaining vessels that helped the Ghost into FTL to make the trip to Herath Prime have had their numbers cut in half already.
She ducks off screen as sparks erupt nearby.
I'm not sure if this vessel will survive this engagement, but as long as the truth is revealed, I've done my job. Back to you in the studio.
Any landing you can walk away from. As the primary display clears and the planet below comes into focus, Wil can see cities covering much of the terrain, with large green spaces and forests spanning the gaps, just kilometer after kilometer of green and growing things. Wil whistles appreciatively at the sight. Incoming contact, Maxim reports. The flight assist drone? Wil had only seen a drone like this in use once. A freighter on its approach to a spaceport he happened to be docked at had experienced a blowout in one of its repulsors. Probably based on the appearance of the freighter from neglecting regular maintenance. The spaceport had scrambled a flight assist drone, 2, actually, in the case the first suffered damage. Flight assist drones are little more than large repulsor systems with basic AI capabilities, which help get them close to the target and lock on. Once attached, the AI shuts down and shunts all controls to the ship it's assisting via a slave circuit. From that point forward, the drone is little more than a slightly ugly repulsor grav-locked onto the vessel. Once the ship is on the ground, the drone AI reactivates and takes control, flying back to its base of operation. Looks like it. I've never actually seen one, but yeah, that must be it, the big Pelorian replies. Wil glances over to Zephyr. Hail it and guide it in. I'm a bit busy. If you need something, call out. Otherwise, I'm going to do my best to keep us moving in a straight line. The drone is moving fast toward the Ghost and only slows as the gap between them closes. By the time the Ghost screams past overhead, the drone is almost matching its velocity. Zephyr has opened a comm link to the pilot AI, and she is guiding it in, helping to identify hard points on the hull that the drone can attach itself to.
Sending you a velocity adjustment, she shouts.
Acknowledged, Wil replies, making the changes needed. Seconds later, the sound of something large latching onto the ship reverberates throughout. Momentarily, the controls go sluggish due to the substantial increase in weight and the drag the drone has suddenly added. But within another second, the main control display shows a repulsor active where the port engine would be, completely slaved into the Ghost's central control systems. Okay, this is kinda cool, Wil says, adjusting power between the two repulsors and the atmospheric engines. Only minutes later, they're approaching the spaceport. Their target landing pad is right out front of the administration center. Several adjacent pads have been cleared. Probably a good idea, Wil thinks. He's working the controls to slow the Ghost down, still about a kilometer from the spaceport, when Maxim shouts something that's lost in the sound of explosions and metal tearing. 4 missiles launched from the Peacekeeper carrier, at an angle impossible for the defenders to intercept, have taken a wide course through the atmosphere to eventually collide with the Ghost on its final approach. The flight assist drone is gone, Wil gathers, as is the starboard engine pod and its repulsor. The port atmospheric engine is also offline. He can't tell if it's there or gone. Hang on, he shouts, slamming the throttle for the atmospheric engines to full power. A loud boom resonates through the ship as the lone engine pushes the Ghost up to supersonic speed. Everyone is slammed back into their seats as the Ghost, which had for 1 second been falling like a rock, is now falling more forward than downward, though technically it's still falling. Brace! Wil shouts as the Ghost approaches the outer wall of the spaceport, barely clearing it. A loud scraping erupts from below. Warnings go off everywhere and the computer is saying something, but Wil can't hear over the noise of his ship screaming through the air. Once past the outer wall, Will cuts the power to the engines. The Ghost, still moving incredibly fast, drops to the ground below. The drop does little to slow the speed of the ship, which is now scraping and bouncing across the spaceport landing area, hitting random ships and bouncing like a pinball as it makes its way to the empty space that had been set aside for it. The entire bridge is dark now, the primary display first crackling with more static, then going dark, then finally, in a burst of hot metal and glass, shattering completely. The 3 crew members hold on for dear life as their ship continues to bounce and slide across the landing area, leaving a tremendous gouge in its wake. The Ghost finally comes to a slow, wobbling halt right in front of the main administration building. "At least we parked where they wanted us to," Will says, then passes out. Outside the ship, fire and rescue vessels are buzzing across the spaceport like angry insects, extinguishing fires all over the landing area and the Ghost itself.